The idea of growing plants to make fuels was once hailed as the start of an energy revolution. With one step, we could solve the problem of climate change and dwindling oil supplies. But it seems it's not that simple. Biofuels are now at the centre of a growing controversy. They've been blamed for rising food prices and widespread deforestation, even with increasing greenhouse gases like CO2. So what's the truth? We've come to the town of Utrecht in the Netherlands to find the answer. André Fijs, the Professor of Energy System Analysis at the University of Utrecht and a world expert on sustainable energy. He says we're capable of growing enough food and producing enough biomass to satisfy all of our needs in the future. We met Professor Fijs on a farm. The farm is currently devoted to growing pasture and raising livestock, but in the future it may well be a prolific source of biofuel feedstocks too. Biofuels seem a really good idea, but they're causing a lot of controversy. What's that all about?
Well, first of all, there are very good reasons to develop and deploy biofuels and more general to use biomass for energy. Because on the one hand, we have a climate problem that we need to solve urgently. And on the other hand, we have an energy problem because we're running out of fossil fuels, in particular oil. And biomass is suited to produce liquid fuels from a renewable source. And that can be any plant matter. The problem, however, at the moment is that when you want to produce a lot of biomass, you also need land to grow it. And that may, when uncontrolled, develop conflicts with, for example, our food supplies or forest areas, etc. So that is now the main discussion point.
Brazil's been very successful, but in Europe we don't have the climate and we don't have the arable land. So how do we make a substantial contribution to our liquid fuels without having those two things?
Right. Well, with that, I don't agree with your statement that Europe doesn't have the climate nor the crops or the space. Europe is in fact a very interesting place on the globe because the population in Europe has stabilized. And so is our food demand. And what we see also is that Europe has been able to develop a very productive agriculture, especially in the old EU member states. When you go to Eastern Europe, you see that agriculture there is far less productive still compared to what has been achieved in Western Europe over the decades. And that means there is a very large production potential in that agricultural sector. And that means that in those areas where you're talking about large land surfaces, the same amount of food that we would need in the future can be produced on far less land. And that means we may have a surplus of land that we can use to produce sustainable biomass.
Where is the increased crop yield going to come from?
That is, very simply said, better management. We have learned over time to be more productive per hectare by breeding crops, by smart management, deploying fertilizers in the right way, the right rotations, etc., etc.
These are things which look very good on paper, but who's going to implement this and how is it going to be implemented?
Well, this is an excellent question. Well, first of all, I would say it may sound complex, but on the other hand, we can also state, do we have a choice? Because on the one hand, we have a key energy problem and a major climate problem, but on the other hand, we have to work very, very hard on our food supplies, on sustainable agriculture, on rural development, as well at the same time. So we have to look at those integrated solutions that can really be developed and deployed on a large scale in the coming decades. We may conclude it's difficult, but it is necessary.
I'm a poor farmer and I live somewhere in Africa, and I know that I can sell crops to make biofuels. So what's to stop me, and why shouldn't I, clear some rainforest and start to grow crops for fuel?
Absolutely. You do not want to produce biomass and biofuels at the expense of forests and nature areas, clearly. So that means these type of developments have to come with right policies, with agricultural zoning, land zoning, government controls and oversight to do that.
Can we do without biofuels?
My answer to that is no. It is a given that we will have a very large and growing demand for liquid fuels to cover the transport needs of a population of 9 billion in 2050. Planes and ships and trucks and all that cannot do without liquid fuels. and we know that demand is growing heavily. There's no real other alternative to achieve that. And that's also true for supplying carbon neutral feedstock to our chemical industry. That is also a big user of oil and natural gas. With the best scientific knowledge that we have today about our food production systems, the capacity of our soils to produce, and all the other needs we need to cover, protect nature, etc. We think combining all that in a sustainable manner, biomass can, in the long run, so we're talking 2050, cover about 1/3 of the future world's energy demand.